Okay. Good morning and welcome to this multi-location meeting of the Visible Services and Street Scene Scrutiny Committee on the 27th of June 2025, 10 a.m. I am Councillor Robert Wood and I will be chairing this meeting. Please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting, could you raise your electronic hand, and for members in the presentation room, just raise your hand. I wish to remind members signing in remotely of their legal obligation to have their cameras switched on during the meeting, please, to be seen and heard whilst participating in council business. Now I will move on to declarations, which is agenda item 2. Are there any declarations of interest?
See no declarations, Chair.
If any members have declarations in relation to any reports on today's agenda, can you please indicate now? The declarations of interest forms can be found on the intranet, resources and guidance. Members have the forms are available in Welsh or English. If you need any help, please let Tom know. We will now consider items that we have selected from the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. Item 3A, which is seafront car parking charges. Members, you will be aware from the email circulated on Wednesday that item 3A has been deferred. I will now call on the Cabinet member, Councillor Wyndham Griffiths, to read a statement relating to this.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members, following the valuable public meeting held at the Seaside Social and Labour Club on Friday, 20th of June, I've instructed officers to give careful consideration to feedback provided at that meeting, along with the subsequent feedback on the matter received through social media, and prepare a more in-depth report that covers the range of matters that have been recently identified in relation to the on-street parking charges at Aberon and Seafront. With the council that listens, therefore, these matters require further time and careful consideration by officers and members to ensure that they are fully addressed. I would like to thank the committee chair for agreeing to defer the report to allow for a more comprehensive and informed report to be brought back to members of this scrutiny meeting before the summer recess and before Cabinet members make any decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Griffiths. Agenda item 4. We take agenda item 4A from the Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. Item 4A is the Park Night Lighting Pilot Feedback Report. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
There's nothing additional I would like to add, unless you want me to just summarise the report, Chair.
Yes, if you would like to do that, thanks, Nicoletta.
Okay, no problem. Last year, as part of the proposed budget savings, a proposal was put forward to implement part night-time lighting. And as a consequence of the discussions that we had at Scrutiny, it was agreed that whilst members at that particular time didn't want to progress with the full part nighttime lighting, they were supportive of having a pilot to establish what the impacts of such a proposal would be upon communities. So in November of last year, a pilot was undertaken where 700 lighting covering 700 properties in 7 locations amounting to 144 lanterns were turned off between the hours of 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. during November. As a consequence of that pilot, or as part of that pilot, we undertook a consultation exercise with each of the 700 residential properties which were within those pilot areas. And this report basically summarises the feedback that we had from that consultation exercise. So we asked a number of questions. For example, did it change routine, the impact upon sleep, overall experience and support for a permanent implementation? We had a 16% response rate from those 700 properties, so 112 responses, and the report indicates that the responses were fairly balanced. There was no extreme response in terms of no, this is unacceptable, or yes, this is fine. It was fairly balanced. So, for example, 68% said that there was no effect on them. 62%, let me start again. 68% said there was no effect on them in terms of their routine. 62% said there was no impact upon them in terms of their sleep. 37% stated there wasn't a negative impact on their overall experience. Only 37% stated there was a negative impact in terms of their overall experience. In terms of support for permanent implementation, that was seemingly balanced, with 43% against, 42% in favour, but a further 8% in favour subject to changes. So the main concerns that were raised by those who were opposed to the proposal was the fear of crime and safety. This was perception rather than actual crime and safety impacts upon those persons who responded. So it's perception rather than evidence-based increase in crime and safety concerns. So the report outlines a little bit more detail than I've explained, and there are options for members to consider. The options are that a larger pilot of 10,000 lights over a 4-month period is undertaken. Alternatively, a phased rollout. Given the balanced response that we've had, are members happy to do a phased rollout over a 4-month period, after which the lights remain off during the hours of 1 AM to 5 AM? Or are there any alternatives that members want us to consider, which we can, as I say, assess, and then that the responses from any other alternatives then can be taken forward for members of Cabinet to consider? So that's effectively what the report says, Chair. I'm accompanied today by Neath, who's the lighting manager, who has far more knowledge of lighting than I will ever have. So if there are any questions, technical questions, I'm sure Nathan can step in and help me out if necessary.
Thanks for that, Nicola. I'll go straight to questions because we've got a few on here. So firstly, I'll go to Councillor Tim Bowen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Reading the report, there's some concerns in the report, especially from Thrive. We're very concerned about the lights turning off. It's quite hard to believe that they state that Neath Talbot is the toughest place in Wales to grow up as a young girl or a lady. That's very concerning, and I think actually turning all street lights off for a massive period could start causing us big problems for stalking and so forth. Once people realise that lights are switched off in every location, then I think we could be starting to look at problems on this. I do think we need to start looking at other ways of trying to save energy. If we start looking at solar panels on our buildings, timers in toilets. I've just been in 2 toilets this morning. All the lights are still on there. There's nobody in there. They're on all day. You know what I mean? Rooms, you're walking in, lights are on. We should have timers. This day and age, people are putting them in their own houses now, where they walk into the room, timer comes on, they go out, it goes off. We've got to start looking at this. Is there, when we start renewing street lights, is it something we could start looking at, that the solar lights, so that they generate in through the day the energy for the night? So if anybody can come back and give me some answers on that.
If I can just come in a sec, do you want to take a lot of questions first and then summarise, or do you want to answer each individual?
Ideally, if we can take them individually.
Okay, that's fine.
So pull them all together.
Can I just jump back in? I forgot one. And can you just give the reason why we can't switch every other light off? I know they've saying there's a shimmer of them. Is that just to vehicles or to pedestrians as well?
If I start then, in terms of energy generation, so renewable energy generation across the county borough in terms of savings, we are implementing energy generation measures, and we were actually in a document, a Welsh Government published document this week. So Neath Talbot were featured on there in terms of the work that we've actually delivered already, in terms of the charging infrastructure we have in the quays for our fleet, and in terms of the energy positive building, which we have in as the technology centre in Baglan Energy Park. So we were featured as an authority who is actually progressing forward positively. So we are doing work there. We've got business cases for a number of projects, and what we have to establish is whether the capital investment associated with implementing those measures will actually result in a positive return on that investment. So you've got to ensure that it stacks up financially before you implement it, because sometimes the capital investment won't actually achieve the savings that we want to secure in terms of ongoing revenue. So we've got business cases that have been developed, and we're reviewing them all the time, having regard to the changing costs of electricity, because it may not have been worth it, say for example 5 years ago, but with changing prices it may be worth it now. So we are reviewing those business cases all of the time. And we've got infrastructure down on the transfer station, which is generating energy, and we are looking to deliver a scheme in Giant's Grave shortly, which is a former landfill site that we manage. So we're doing a lot across the county borough. We've also installed timers on lights and implementing LEDs in Neath Civic Centre and in the quays. So what you just described, Vice Chair, is exactly what happens in those buildings. It doesn't happen in this building because of the works that are being undertaken at the moment to the theatre. And what we would like to do is remodel the rest of this building as well and bring it up to a standard that enables more sort of flexible working arrangements, which is not currently the case because there's small rooms which belong to certain sections. So if you work in this building but you're not normally based in this building, you can't just wander around and sit down somewhere. So we're looking to remodel this building, and as part of that remodelling, the lighting infrastructure will be part and parcel of that proposal. So we are implementing measures wherever we can to save money, and we're maxing out on that at the moment. In terms of the solar, I don't know whether I can rely on Nathan. I know that we have done. I know our street lighting is relatively new compared to other authorities, because we went through a SALEX programme where we borrowed money to ensure that we could replace our lighting. So it is relatively new compared to a lot of other authorities. But that's as far as my knowledge goes on lighting matters. So I don't know if Nathan, if you can come in on that.
Yeah, with the solar options there, obviously on paper it sounds like a great idea, but sometimes practically it's not the case. We do utilise in some areas generally to get around an engineering problem where we're struggling to get supplies, and the cost is quite substantial to get a supply to these areas. There is generally quite a cost with solar as well. They usually are quite expensive, and a lot of the times the money you would save from solar you've actually lost by spending on the solar panel itself. So it's not always practical in a lot of cases. There's other things like, obviously we get limited light over here in the winter time. Sometimes places where we have tried in the past, there hasn't been enough light to keep the light on during the winter months, and that's where we've had to make some adjustments. And there's a few challenges in that regard. So a widespread solar would be a difficult one to invest in and see a payback.
Thanks for that.
The switch, wasn't it? Why can't we switch every other?
Yeah, again, of course, perhaps a good idea there of the every other lantern, but in the lighting world, uniformity is very important kind of thing, and it's a real consideration. Effectively, how the eye adjusts going from a bright area to a dim area, it takes a bit of time. You might notice when you wake up in the morning, sometimes if someone turns the light on, quickly your eyes adjust. And on a highway environment where that could be, you're creating these environments, it's not ideally a safe thing to do in that regard. So in the uniformity aspect, dimming the light is considered better. Of course, every other light, you're also half in your savings there as well. But dimming is considered the more favourable option there, and that's something we're already doing in lighting. In the past few years and a little before my time, a lot of lighting schemes and projects have been put on, and we're at a point now where the only thing left is to partner light areas, and that is where we're at the moment.
Thanks for that. I'll bring in Councillor Galsworthy next then, please.
I'm a bit torn on this one because there's a lot I'm all for it, and then there's some I'm against it. Looking at the responses in, I always assume that when someone don't actually take the time to respond, if you know, obviously they're not that bothered whether it happens or not. So in this case, and obviously I had one of the pilot areas as well, so only a third of my own residents actually responded. Going through the reasons why, the majority of them are all about their own house. I personally don't believe that it's up to the public purse to light up their own houses. Ours is for obviously the highway. A lot of reasons were given as to a car being stolen in the actual estate, and it so happens it was my own dad's car. And honestly, my mother's security lights lights up Crystal Palace, and it was still gone. So it's like, I don't think that's a reason as well there, if I'm being honest. You know, it's difficult for us in plenty of ways. I did love the idea about every other one, but the other experience I've had was an Ironman down in Saundersfoot, where they do this, and I was driving the car into the estate to drop people off, and all the lights were out, and I literally missed a car because I did not see the car, because you know, like when your back lights are on, so it was like on the side in a culdy, and I didn't see it. So for them reasons then, I'm sort of like against it. But on the whole, from 1 to 5, when people are saying about young girls walking the streets and all that, my question would be, well, why are young girls walking the streets between 1 and 5? And in fact, like most people, because they are obviously, like, you know, work shifts normally go for 6 and this, that, and the other. So it is a very difficult one for me. But I did like the bit where it says about censor. And, you know, like if obviously, you know, yes, all right, you can have a cat or whatever now and again, but a sensor, obviously someone walking, sensor come on like a security light on the streets, then I would like to know more about that. And I know you've given a good explanation about every other one, but my other concern is, it's like everything else. Once sometimes we make a decision, if for instance it doesn't work, then are we able then to do a U-turn back? Because I think pilots are one thing, but again, it's the fact of I want to be open-minded, and if it's not working, we put back on. So I think, you know, going forward, I'm still very open on it all.
The U-turns are not always such a bad thing anyway. Just going on, is there anything you'd like to come back on that?
I think if I answer the you know, the matters that the councillor mentioned in terms of what the purpose is of streetlights, yes, it's to light the highway. It's not to light individual properties, and that's why presumably members of the public have security lights. I've got security lights in my garden. You know, we're not. You know, we had some feedback that people had to turn the light on in the middle of the night to go to the toilet, bathroom, whereas previously the streetlights provided that level of illumination. That's not what streetlights are for. No. They're there to illuminate the highway and the highway only. In terms of sensors, I don't know whether or not that is appropriate, because you'll have lights coming on and off and on and off, and that will also possibly be a danger to the public. But I don't know. That's my uninformed opinion. I'm sure Nathan can perhaps help us out there.
You know, they do kind of do that, but it's generally at the moment where they're looking on these smart motorways and the faster roads, these areas where they can record traffic flows during the night, and depending on how many vehicles are on the road, they can dim the lights in certain circumstances. We do utilise in some areas, particularly with those solar panels, where energy is quite important with the battery life of those. But they're more on footpaths where footfall and pedestrians moving at a slow pace. Whether that would transfer to vehicles on a road and how quickly these sensors would have to react, and whether you need to see further down the road before you approach it, could probably cause complications in that area. So it's not something I would probably advise in residential areas in that case, and how it would work perhaps, especially with the initial, again, costs that would go with it. The benefits we do have with this partner lighting is engineers and things before me have put in place this CMS system, which we have, and this is how we control the street lighting. We can control it all remotely from a laptop in the office. Many other authorities don't have this luxury, and partner lighting in those cases does cost quite considerable capital investment at the start, where operatives need to attend each street light. But we do have the benefit of being able to control these from the laptop, which avoids us paying this initial cost, which ultimately helps our savings, and that's part of the benefits in our regard. But I've gone off on a tangent slightly there, but
Educating us, I call it, Nathan, educating us.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, can I have Councillor Sarah Thomas, please?
Thank you, Chair. So during pre-brief, someone mentioned that dimming further is not an option. Can you explain why not? Because that doesn't really make sense to me.
there's quite strict standards, well, recommendations. They tend to be the ILP, the Institute of Lighting Professionals, is a body that we take a lot of our recommendations from. With road lighting design, depending on where the road is and the configuration, there's different categories that you might categorize a road effectively. Depending on what the road is, would be the specific lighting levels you would need on those roads. We've already implemented dimming down to these, what I would call minimum levels in many cases. So there's not much room, in my opinion, to go further than what we already are doing in a lot of cases.
Sorry.
But there needs to be the bar or a limit. Otherwise, you could dim down to 1% effectively.
Yeah, I don't think.
Can I come back on that though, Chair? So I'm just a little bit confused. Like, you're saying that the lights are at the lowest level they can possibly go for safety, but it's okay to turn them off. Is that what you're saying?
There's a different avenue there, because ultimately, when they're switched off, there is a sense of uniformity there as well, isn't it? But notably, dimming lights to an area, it's not legally and recommended, is what I would say, by professional bodies, and that's all I can say on that, really, from my point of view.
Okay.
I kind of grew up in, as did many of us, with the sodium vapor lights, which were much dimmer, and they didn't seem to be a problem. Indeed, I would imagine they were better for the health of animals and people, because they're in the red spectrum as opposed to full spectrum light. And could we not in any way emulate that?
The way we light roads has changed over time, and a little before me as well. Like, say, the old Son and Sox lights, which provided the more warmer orange lights, and back in olden times it was more, you would light the background of an object and you'd see a silhouette of a person crossing the road, whereas now with the white lighting and the modern LEDs, which are more efficient, it's more about lighting the actual object itself. It's just an evolution of how they are lighting things these days. People do prefer the warmer lights in some cases. There are arguments for, especially with animals and things like that, you can utilise these more environmental friendly light spectrums and frequencies. But at the moment, the way they're going with things, 3000 Kelvin to 4000 Kelvin is what the majority of lighting professionals are using.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Regard.
Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about switching them completely off when you say that it's at its safest level when it's dim now, that we could go. Bear in mind what Councillor Galsworthy said about when it was completely off, the accidents that could occur, or things that we haven't predicted yet could happen in that period. I don't understand why we would switch them all off if we can go to a safe level of dimming. But the other point that you mentioned about the warmer lights, for people with visual problems, LED lights are absolutely horrendous.
These room
And
lights are
they're in shops and everything, and they're not really thinking about people who have got issues with their sight, So that's another aspect of that. But I just wanted to ask another question, if I may, to Nicola. When you said about the capital investment, Nicola, looking at long-term efficiencies, well, how far do we project when we're looking at that?
Each capital project will be different depending what what it is. So and the longevity of that sort of investment. So if you were investing in a building, for example, it's going to have possibly a longer lifespan and then provide better returns on your investment than if you were investing in a car, for example. I know that's not an analogy.
So when we're looking at lighting, about how long would that projection be? Is 5 years over a 5-year period, or?
Well, in terms of lighting, I don't think there is an investment that we can undertake over and above what we're already doing. That will bring us that reduced revenue pressure, because we're installing electric charging infrastructure wherever we can. That's normally over a 20-year sort of lifespan before you have to change the PVs and things. So if you can't get your money back within that 20-year period, then why would you progress with it? Because you're spending more than you're actually getting in terms of reducing your revenue costs. You may want to do it for environmental reasons, so if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, there are some organisations, for example, who will pay more to reduce their carbon footprint because they've got environmental responsibilities. But in terms of the activities we are taking at the moment, we're doing it for environmental as well as budgetary reasons, because we have got a significant hole in our budget, which is why we're coming forward with all the budget savings that we've been doing, it seems like, for the last 15 years, because we have to reduce our overall costs to try and prevent us from actually cutting services. So that's why we're bringing this forward, because we would rather reduce our costs than cut services, which is, at the moment, those are the choices that we've got.
It's just, obviously, we are concerned with safety, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Dacey next then, please, sir.
Thank you. I think I jumped the queue there, but do you want me to go, or may as well? Yeah. Right. Only 16%. So only 16% of the 700 homes responded to the feedback, and that was split opinion. So that's down to 8% of negative responses. So I would suggest that perhaps we expand the trial to different areas and survey once again, because if there's a negative response from bigger areas, then perhaps we can. But before we do that, I would consult with the police to target which areas we would try to expand the trial to.
Yeah, one of the options that members will have in the report is whether they are minded to consider a 4-month pilot where we turn 2,500 lanterns off each month, scaling up to that 10,000 lanterns. And we can establish what the impact is of that sort of pilot then. It'll give us a better idea over a wider geography what the impact will be. Now, Nathan and his colleagues have been consulting with the police, and they've raised no concerns so far. We've also been consulting with other groups. The Thrive has been consulted specifically, and whilst they've raised general concerns about the impact upon, or the perception of the impact upon safety, we will continue to work with them and keep them informed so that it's a two-way conversation, so we get their feedback, but we also keep them informed of any issues that arise if members are minded to support a pilot. So if members want to see how it will impact upon a wider area, then option 1 in your report would enable you to do that.
Okay, Councillor. Right, okay, next up, Councillor Susan Grounds, please. Okay, no longer in attendance. Councillor Lewis then, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry I was late to the meeting and missed the first part. My concerns regarding dimming or turning off the street lighting would be, in particular, safety to females, elderly and young people. That's a big concern for me. I would like to see reports from, I'm new to this directorate, so I would like to see reports if it's been piloted in other councils. Personally, I believe it's a statutory service and I don't think it should be an option for negotiation personally. I walk a lot and I walk from the town centre during the winter months, and I already feel quite vulnerable as a grown female doing that. When I walk alone, I don't like it walking through town, and I can't wait to get to a village because I feel it's more lit up and there's far more cars driving past. I feel safer there. So from my perspective, I don't like it as dimmed as it is now in the Neath town centre. And I think there are other directorates that have far bigger budgets that they should be looking at making savings rather than this as a saving. I do have a meeting on Monday with as a representative for Neath Talbot with the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I would like her opinion on it as well. So I would like to feedback that if that's possible. But I'm pretty much against turning off lighting anywhere. But is that okay? Thank you.
Do you want to come in? Yeah.
I appreciate the perception of safety is probably impacts upon everyone, not just the young and old, and not just women either. I think everybody in society is concerned about safety, and we acknowledge that. In terms of the timing of the lights, we specifically chose between 1 AM and 5 AM so that it would have the minimum impact upon people who are out walking or coming home from a social occasion, social event and so on, so that it would impact on as few people as possible. In terms of budget cuts, we are looking at all options as a council at the moment. So each of the directorates have been asked to go away and find savings because we've got quite a large gap in our budget. It's around about £8-9 million at the moment, and that is making a number of assumptions which may not necessarily come through. So it could get bigger, it could get smaller, but it's there. It's going to be there. And unless we find savings, we are going to have to cut services. We have made cuts to statutory services. I'm not a statutory officer as a director. My role is not a statutory role, but a large amount of services within my directorate are statutory services that we have to provide, whether we like it or not. And what we have been doing is cutting back those services. So we still provide the statutory service and we will continue to provide those statutory services, but they may not necessarily be to the calibre they were before we started making the cuts. And that is what happens when you have to reduce your budget. I'm afraid it's not anything that we all support as officers. I'd love to have lots more staff providing a better service to the public, but unfortunately I don't have that. In terms of the Police and Crime Commissioner, yeah, we'll be happy to get any feedback that you have from that meeting, but we have been consulting with the police all the way through this process and they are generally supportive. They've indicated areas where they are undertaking activities, for want of a better term, where they've got operations going on to ensure that we don't impact upon those operations. So we have specifically stayed away from those geographical areas. So we will continue to work with the police should members be minded to move forward with park night lighting, even if it is on a pilot basis, which we would be happy to support.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Councillor. Right, next up I've got Councillor Suzanne Paddis.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I was lower down the queue. Thank you very much. I'm a bit concerned about the numbers of responses. It is not a member of the public's duty to respond to anything. And I think that drawing an influence that if you don't respond, you're not against can be dangerous on that level. I've also rang up officers and asked, if lighting is switched off totally in any particular area, do the security cameras on doorbells still function? And in all fairness, it was a little ambiguous. We didn't really know whether they would work or not, which is why I'm really curious to find out why the police are lodging no opposition to this, in that they rely an awful lot these days on doorbell and CCTV cameras provided by the public when investigating crime. So I would like to delve into that with the police a little further, because I'm not really sure about their answer on this. What also concerns me is the VASDOR report on page 33, starts on page 32. If people do become aware that there will be no lighting, then this thing about a perceived increase in crime may become actual. And I don't want this council to be part of being involved in allowing perpetrators to stalk or to carry out violent offences and not be seen. So I'm a little with Councillor Lewis on this one. It seems it's our duty to protect the public. So with regards to a greater rollout, I think there are too many questions at the moment that need to be delved into before we go forward with a greater rollout. And then when that report comes back, then maybe we would be in a position to roll it out further, even on a trial basis. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anything to come back on then?
In terms of the consultation response rate, you know, we can't really confirm why people choose not to respond to a consultation exercise. Obviously, we actually wrote letters to each of the properties within which the trials took place, and we encouraged them to respond. We can't force them to respond. I know personally, if I had a big issue with something, I would go out of my way to respond and to make my feelings known. And if I was, you know, fairly neutral on it, I probably wouldn't. But that's just personally me. I can't really confirm why people in these pilot areas chose not to respond. We would have to ask every single one of them why they didn't, and I'm not necessarily sure we can do that. In terms of the CCTV, I know that Nathan can answer that question.
Yeah, with the CCTV kind of cameras, I suppose ultimately it depends on what grade of camera you have. You know, for example, I can only speak of my experience. My home camera, I know during the night it switches to like a nighttime mode. I imagine a lot of CCTV cameras used for safety and things do have a night mode in that case. If we're talking about police CCTV and things, part night light is not usually recommended in areas of CCTV, town centres, or I know there's a few locations amongst the authority where we do have CCTV, and we wouldn't be looking to switch lighting off in those areas. And we would be speaking to the police regularly on that, and obviously their opinions would be taken on board as well.
Okay. Thanks for that. If I can bring in Councillor Goldsworthy next then, please.
Interesting conversation here today. And I got two, if that's okay, Chair.
Two questions, yeah.
Basically, one is about the I've got a number of streets that are unadopted highways. So again, how do they work? Because are they on dimmers? You know, because I don't think we maintain them rampers. I might be wrong, but I'm sure it's like management companies do them. Also, I think, you know, like when everyone is saying about burglaries and things like that, I think there's a lot of burglaries take place during the day as well. And I think we've got to focus on the timings here of 1 and 5 rather than the lights going out and things like that. But the other concern that I do have is, like, say, take for instance, those who know Bryn Brydden, or it's like Burnwood in Margam and that. The streets are so narrow, the cars are parked either side, and you're going like this at the best of times. So if the darkness there, I got to be honest, I think that would be an absolute nightmare in itself. It's all right for the bigger estates, got their own driveways and things like that. But I think we've also got to think, so again, rolling it out, some would suit it maybe, others wouldn't. And that's why I'm very torn on it, sort of both ways. But I think the main thing for me is trial and error. But as a council, you know, I think I'd have more respect for people. I think U-turn is a good word today, you know, is the U-turn on things, in the sense of if something's not working, then basically we sort out. We all know that we've actually, over the years, thankfully before my time, outsourced a lot of services, our buildings, etc. And we now know that that was never the best thing to do, especially in a cost way. So again, I'm very much either way there. So,
Hey, Nicola, if you want to come back.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the adopted road, so I don't know if Nathan can cover that, and then I can cover the others.
Yeah, adopted roads, of course, is as they go through construction and not adopted by the authority, as we all know. In those regards, we don't main the lighting there either until the adoption takes place. So in that regard, I don't think we would be able to switch those off until they came into our hands, where they would also be reviewed and perhaps added to the scheme following a review. We've adopted it.
And in the unadopted streets where the lights are not within our management control, we're obviously not paying an electric bill relating to those lights. So why would we turn them off? It's not, if it's not going to benefit the council's budget position. In terms of U-turns you were talking about, you know, if we were to do a pilot, then it would enable us to establish what the impacts would be. We could assess those impacts, and then we could make a decision on whether or not it's the right thing to do to progress with part nighttime lighting or not. So that gives us an ability to test the water on a wider scale. In terms of vehicular movements in narrow streets, I appreciate where you're coming from. I suppose between 1 and 5 in the morning, there is only restricted vehicular movements generally. So it would probably only apply to a very, very limited number of people. And obviously they've got the lights on their vehicle that they can use to help them to manoeuvre through the streets. You know, you can put your wide beam on, and as you said earlier on, it could light up Crystal Palace when you've got your long beam on and things. So, you know, people can use that if they do choose to drive through very narrow streets at that time of the morning or the night. You know, I hope that covers those questions.
Councillor Thomas, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, is it possible? So there was talk about, you know, doing it in a way that allows people to go out socially, but obviously, particularly younger people, and we have been talking about young women this evening, you know, they go out at the weekend a bit later. Would it be possible to have a different schedule on a Friday night and a Saturday night, for example? And I've got a second question as well. So there was just talk about town centres. One of the things that I've never really understood is in industrial estates, why they're lit up like a Christmas tree at 1 or 2 in the morning, because nobody's there. Like, and most people don't even drive through to get somewhere. So, I mean, have we considered turning those off entirely after like 9 p.m? You know, it's not even really getting deliveries at that time of night.
I suppose those are options that you know, as part of the report that we presented to members today, we presented 2 potential options to progress it, but we've in the report also asks for ideas from you guys. We're more than happy to go away and look at whether or not that would work. I don't know, Nathan, whether you've got any response based on turning them off in industrial estates or changing the hours on a Friday and a Saturday night at the moment, or whether we'd have to go away and think about that.
I think it's important that, for me, it's not a rigid approach as well. It will evolve over time as we implement it, kind of thing, if approved, of course. There are conversations we can have about industrial estates. Perhaps some have nighttime deliveries and they require it, larger vehicles and larger plant sometimes in those areas. So it can evolve in many ways, and those discussions can take place before implementation, really.
Okay. Councillor Tim Bowen, please.
Yes, thank you. Sarah's just asked part of my question. about weekend switching off and so forth. You know, we do get a lot of youngsters patrolling the roads on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, you know, early hours. I get them walking up with us, you know, when you think, where the hell are you going this time in the morning? The other problem we've got at the moment is with the new cars, with these LED lights that they got in total darkness, they totally blind you.
Yeah,
You just can't see. You pass them and you're going into dark and you just don't know where you are on the road. At least when you got a bit of light, you come in past them, you know, you get that bit of visibility. I feel, listening to all the comments today, as if we're going back to the 1940s, where we're waiting for the areas sirens to go off and all the lights go off within 2025. I know we've got to save money, but we've got to have a bit of, you know, social life, a bit of normality, basically. If we're going to be switching lights off and everything, then I think we're going back to them days. And in them days, you didn't have all the crime, you didn't have all the rapes, you didn't have all the assaults. Now, you walk down the back lane and you're on edge. Even as a man, you go in places and you're thinking, I don't want to be here. You know me, you're on your own and it's eerie. So I got to be honest, I'm totally against a full blackout on any switching off of lights today.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I'll just bring in then Councillor Ros Davis as our last speaker.
Yes, one of the areas where the pilot took place was in my ward. And when I realised that, I thought I'm going to have a lot of complaints, but I didn't personally have one complaint. So it seemed to have worked pretty well. And I'll tell you, they are very vociferous in my ward, as Alan will know.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I think we've debated this thoroughly enough now. So I think we'll go back to the report where it's asking for, on its recommendations, there's 3 options. And what I think we'll do is we'll take a vote on each option, would be the best. Tom to my left has been taking notes throughout. So if we did go for option 3, then everything that has been discussed today can go to formulate what the committee reports back to the officers. So
That includes the recommendations. Are you going to read them out?
I think so we're all right on the options first. So here's everybody read the options.
28.
To do show of hands on each option. So Chair, based on the fact that you want to do each option one by one, I think probably the best thing we should do is for somebody to propose each option individually, just so we can take the vote on it. So if I don't know whether you wanted to propose a particular option to start off with, and then we'll basically ask members for abstentions first, and then whether anyone is for and against, and then we can work out where we are with it. If you could give me just a moment, I just want to get myself ready, just because obviously we have some substitutions as well, so I just want to make sure I've got the right people voting. A few seconds. So I think, Jeff, if you could ask for a proposer for option 1.
Right, if I could have a proposer for option 1, please.
I'll propose, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
And a seconder as well.
Seconder.
I second.
I'll second that.
So thank you, Councillor. So option 1 has been proposed and seconded. Therefore, if I could ask members if they have any abstentions for option 1. I see no abstentions. So if we could ask members if you are for option 1. So you could raise your hands either electronically, sorry, or in the room. Right, so we have 2 for option 1. Therefore, option 1 is not passed because there are 10 members present today. Therefore, we will now need to take. Oh, sorry. What's that? Sorry. Oh, Councillor Davis as well. Right, so we have 3 for option 1. Anyone else before I? Okay, right. So option 1 has not passed. Therefore, we will now need to move on to option 2. So if we could take a proposer for option 2, please. Nobody wishes to propose?
Go on, I propose, Chair.
No, Councillor Bowen has proposed option 2. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. Right, if I can ask if members have any abstentions for option 2. No abstentions. And if I could see your hands if you were for option 2, please. Right, I see no hands for, therefore option 2 has failed also. Therefore we move on to option 3. If I could have a proposer for option 3, please. Councillor Goldsworthy, thank you. And Councillor Bowen seconded. Any abstentions? I see none. Therefore, if I could ask if you could raise your hands electronically or in the room if you are for option 3. Option. So,
What are you then?
Okay.
None of them are out?
No.
That's not the option. I can be in within option 3. That's option 3 then.
Option 3 is option 3,
Yeah, option 3. Then.
Oh, sorry, I haven't read that. Yeah.
I hadn't read them, look, and I was reading them, right?
I have 6 members for option 3. Therefore, option 3 has passed. So just to confirm with the committee, option 3 was the committee to reject options 1 and 2 and to provide their own comments and observations regarding next steps. So as the chair referred to earlier, I've been taking notes of all the members' comments and suggestions as we've gone through. So we can provide that to officers after the meeting.
Okay.
Chair. So just say,
Option 3 sneak down into my screen.
He needed an option 4 really to say, we'll just let him full stop and put him.
So I can confirm that option 3 has been put forward for consideration for the cabinet. So I can hand you now back to the chair for the next item.
Right, okay, that's that item passed now. Item 5 is performance monitoring. There are no performance monitoring reports on this occasion. Item 6 is the selection of items for future scrutiny. Members, we will now look at the Cabinet and Scrutiny forward work programmes and discuss any items we may wish to add to the forward work programme. Members, do you have any requests? No?
Can I come in a minute?
Councillor Bowen.
We had a meeting prior to this to discuss things going forward.
Yep.
Have all members been notified of what we will be looking at?
So I'm just collating the discussion that yourself and I had with the chair on the feedback from that forward programme session. So I'm looking to have a meeting with Nicola as director to discuss the options and ideas that came forward. So once I've managed to do that, should be able to properly populate the forward work programme for members. And then obviously, I know there's some suggestions, for example, of having workshops as well, so we can arrange when those best meeting dates should be, etc. But I'm sort of still collating things at the moment, so slightly slow on my part, so I do apologise.
No problem. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for that update, Tom. Item 7 is urgent items. I have none. That ends the business for today, and thank you all very much for attending. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Again, when you say that, it's like you all got to go clapping, isn't it?
Option 3 sneak down in the screen and then you can see option 3.
No worries.
No,